Hello, everyone. Hello, Todd.
Hello, Patricia.
um, Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. My name is Patricia Kong. I'm with Todd Miller, my buddy, my friend, a PST with Scrum.org. We are here to talk today, and the topic is engaging stakeholders in management with evidence-based management. So I'm really glad that we were able to get our schedules together to do this, because this has been something that many people have been asking us about, especially in general, the notion of stakeholder management. So for today, we're going to have that conversation. Todd and I have kind of like a story workshop-y thing that we've put together for you. I expect it to take maybe 30, 40 minutes, depending on what kind of conversation we have. And so we're going to answer your questions at the end. We'll leave 15, 20 minutes at least. But just to let you know that get your questions ready, but we're gonna try to park those for the end. So your microphones will be muted throughout. The session is recorded. Our colleague Lindsay Villasina is in the back. She'll answer your tech questions, and then she'll get these slides up for you right after. So quick reminder, who is Scrum.org? We are helping people and teams solve complex problems. We're an organization founded by Ken Schwaber, who focuses on training, certification, ongoing learning, and for me, about community. So Todd is part of our professional Scrum trainer community, and he can introduce himself.
Yeah. Hey, how's it going? I'm Todd Miller. Here's a couple bullet points about me. I think that's good enough. That's good enough introduction.
Technically, there's 6 bullet points.
6. So that's more than a couple. There's 6 bullet points about me. So
Yep.
PST now 7+ years. I actually started using EBM right before I was a PST. Thanks
That's
to you,
right.
Trish. Introduced me to it.
Yes, I scared him into it. So my name's Patricia Kong. I have been part of Scrum.org for 10, going on 11 years, focused on enterprise agility. And right now I'm really doing a lot of work actually around the learning enablement, so that we can get those thoughts out into the enterprise, and helping different individuals and teams. So I do a lot of development and research around that work. I think that's about all that we need to really talk about for ourselves. You can always hit us up on LinkedIn if you're really interested in learning more. But what kind of spawned this topic for us, and Todd can pick this up, but it was Todd and I think we can say this, we're working on a project together. So we're working on a project together around EBM. And so the conversations that we've been really having is, what's working, what's not working in organizations, and what have our experiences been. So we've been breaking that up into different areas, and we wanted to share this topic and really learn from everyone too about what their struggles with, and in terms of managing those relationships with stakeholders, setting those expectations. So Todd, these were some of the things that we just riffed on. You want to go through them?
Yeah. I think you could view this through the lens of Scrum or whatever you might be using. We're assuming a lot of Scrum people in here, but you can also just view this generally from organizations where, I think you and I have both experienced these things, right? Where when you're trying to engage stakeholders and or managers, or perhaps those are one and the same for you right now, they're not available, they're busy, right? Oftentimes it's related to the second bullet, because they're not interested, right? They're busy meeting hopping, right? And so you're left with just trying to scramble around, going to some status update meeting where they're just taking information and then running to the next meeting and forgetting what you talked about, right? So there's also this thing in a lot of organizations where, bureaucracy is what we were talking about earlier, where there's just like a whole bunch of bureaucracy in organizations. People are still really put into silos, right? And so across those silos and those departments, there's a lot of bureaucracy going on, especially from that stakeholder and management level. Different interests, different things that people are trying to accomplish, oftentimes maybe tied to a bonus or something like that, or just tied to their own interests. So I'll pause. Trish, you have anything you want to chime in there with?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, but even the first two bullets, they're not available, they're busy, they're not interested. Now, if we're talking about stakeholders in the form of customers, there's another thing there where it's not just, it's about how have you developed that relationship with the customer? Do you have access to them? Are you engaging them with something that is going to solve something for them that's interesting? There's that part too, whereas we're usually very scarred by what's happening internally. At least I am. We both are. But it's the other thing that I want to think about too, the other relationships that are very important stakeholder relationships. We were talking about Bear Crazy, the lack of understanding of Agile. That was an interesting one, which relates to the next bullet, but lack of understanding of Agile in terms of they don't know what this means. They don't know that the team needs input in order to adapt their work, that the input we can get is something that's going to drive our direction, those kind of things. And so they might be either not show up for meetings or be very disruptful at meetings.
Yeah. And for some reason, like in my head right now, I keep thinking about how we talk about lack of understanding about Agile and we talk about this word traditional here. Really, I think what we're implying here is just being married to a plan, right? And so you went through your annual budgeting process and there was a plan to maybe develop this new product and you're just blindly following that plan. And it's a deviation to that plan that is considered to be something bad that happened rather than the fact that you got new and better information and that could cause you to change a decision that you made, right? And so a lack of understanding of agility is let's just drive to a plan still, and this traditional style of following the plan over dealing with the new information that we're receiving from the market. So I think that's what we're talking about when we could talk about traditional.
Oh, Todd, come on. You were talking about power. we were definitely talking about power and ego. We'll be very transparent in this webinar.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say too is, and the more power that, a person tends to possess in an organization, the more people listen to when they come and, do this now. Yeah.
So thinking about that engagement is really, really important. And the lack of alignment, this is people understanding different things. I think this is going to happen. You think this is going to happen. I think we should be doing this. You think we should be doing that. Those kind of things. So whatever it is, what we find is that there's this imbalance in how we're approaching these relationships. So we still want to think about what questions are they asking. So what questions are the stakeholders of management asking us that they're expecting to learn something from us. So there's tons more questions. These are the 4 that we thought of. So just a little bit of an opportunity for us to engage with you and you to engage with us. So we're going to ask you to go to menti.com, use the code 12850182. And what we're looking to learn from you is what questions are you asked by your stakeholders and management when you have a chance to engage with them? Is it, how is your team doing? What are you doing to help your team? What have you achieved with the team? How did you make your decisions? And what we're going to do is look to unpack that. So feel free to go on your phone or go on another screen if you're watching us. And I'm going to share results. So you can actually choose as many as you would like.
Yeah, I think we understand that this is different perspectives, a lot of different people joining the call from their own vantage points. Interesting. What have you achieved?
That is really interesting. Todd, why don't you be a sportscaster? We'll give everybody like 30 more seconds. I'm really surprised, actually.
Yeah, I actually am too.
But I shouldn't be. I shouldn't be surprised.
I think I was expecting how is your team doing to be the number one, but what have you achieved with your team?
Yeah. What are you doing to help your team and how did you make your decisions are lower than I expected, but I'm not surprised at all. It's very much like, what have you done is essentially what that 51% is saying. So thank you, everyone, for participating. So let's unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, do you want me to read these out loud? Or
You read them out loud?
the results? Or are we going to go? You want to go into our case then?
Well, I can finish I can read the final results.
Right on.
So
Cool.
how is your team doing? That was 28%. What are you doing to help the team? About 9%. What have you achieved with the team? And so, well, this is interesting, right? Because I'm wondering if there are many coaches or Scrum Masters on. What have you achieved with the team is strong at 50. And then how did you make your decisions is 13. So nobody has asked how they're helping the team. All right. So let's unpack this. Let's say those are the questions that we get, and especially knowing what have you achieved with the team. We have a little case study for you.
We do. Yeah, so we're going to use a company that we made up called We Help Forever Consulting Company, LLC. Now, this is based off of a lot of observations Trish and I have had places and some of our own experiences. So let's put ourselves in a situation here where in the past 6 months, management of this consulting company has seen a downturn in revenue, right? And so they're seeing a decline in the number of hours being billed. However, current customers that they have are satisfied. So they are measuring in some way customer satisfaction of their current customers, but they're noticing a low growth in new customers. So a lot of the same customers are repeats of this consulting company, and they're not really getting a lot of new customers. So we have Chad now. Chad's going to be the subject of of this case study, right? He's a delivery manager. And he says that I'm going to create some new goals for my department, right? And here are the two goals. And by the way, they're accompanied with measurements. We want to triple the number of client interactions through email or phone, right? And this is how we're going to get some leads for new customers. Triple that number of client interactions through email or phone. Chat's pretty passionate about this, right? This is how we're going to get some new customers. Is this new client calling and emailing? Also, because we have a decrease in revenue. Let's bump up billable hours, grow size of bookings with current customers by 3%, right? And that's going to lead to us increasing revenue, right? That's what Chad's thinking through.
Yeah, Chad is a little friendlier in his tone than the experience that I've had. It's like, do this now, start calling everybody you know and pick up the phone. And what Todd and I were talking about in our own experiences is how this really does relate to, sorry for that little thing there, this model of measurement and goals. And so Chad, if we look at those, we're going to triple the number of people that we call an email, which is, by the way, outdated. And we need to just grow the size of booking with current customers by 3%. Pick that up because numbers are going down. Is going to affect how people who have to do the work start thinking about stuff. So Todd, when someone has told you need to grow customer or to start doing more work, what has that done in your behavior?
Yeah. So I will do anything I can to appease the number that they're looking for. Right. So triple contacts, email or phone calls, right? I'm going to do that. I'm going to triple them. It doesn't mean that any of them are relevant. And I might just find the same list and call it every single day and email every single day, right? So my behavior then becomes about making that metric look good. So we've now introduced a goal to get new customers by tripling this acquisition. That's our goal. And we have a measurement behind it. Think about that. I mean, you've been in this similar circumstance too, Trish. It's like that one to-do thing you have to do when you walk in the morning is send your emails, make your calls, and then you can get on with the rest of your work. Right.
Yeah. I feel like I'm okay enough to say that I have a lot of people's phone numbers memorized because this has happened to me. My friends' phone numbers, my family's phone number. I don't know. I'm gonna age myself. Movie phone, when we had to call to check the weather, all those phone numbers, I know them because of these types of goals. So this is something to think about, is that when we have those different goals, when people are asking a question, then they're looking and we're just saying, yep, you know what, we're going to start calling, we're going to start contacting more people, and we're going to grow revenue. Think about what happens in terms of how that will affect how people will behave on a team. And I think the other thing that's maybe, could be added to this graphic is, what does that say about the values of a company? PSC Mark Noneman pointed that out once, and I thought that was really, really helpful to kind of think about that. So continue with the case study, Todd.
Yeah, so here we are. It's a month later. Chad's in a meeting. He's at a status meeting with other managers and executives of the company. And, he's getting asked these questions. How did you make your decisions? These are the questions that we open with. How is each team doing? What are you doing to help the team? What have you achieved? And we've come up with a little bit of a dashboard that we've seen similar things that we're talking that we in the trenches, really. So how do you make your decisions? Based off of our dashboard data, we're making these decisions. So you can see over the past 3 months now, Chad has charted out in the last quarter of where we're at. And let's suppose it's March, right? We're getting ready to turn the page to April. But you can see we're looking green, right? We've increased to billable hours already, Trish. Isn't that great?
That's great.
Yeah,
That's
it's great.
That's all we wanted, was a little bit more billable hours.
Yeah, so revenue's potentially going to go up because of that, right? And people on the bench, right? So for those unfamiliar in consulting terms, people on the bench are people that are not put onto a project, right? It's someone that's waiting in the wings, maybe to be put on a new project, or their existing project just ended. It's someone sitting idle. And so you could see here too, we've reduced one person from the bench, right? Which means maybe that's because of billable percent. I'm not sure, right? But here I am, as Chad, making these decisions. We have more projects in flight. Look at all the activity around new client emails and new calls. Success. The goals are working, right?
Well, so I see that these numbers are they're interesting. Like, I know that there's a triple on new client calls. And we have one less person on the bench, so people are busier. But what does that really mean? And like more billable hours, what does that really mean, Todd?
Yeah, it means everybody's really busy, right? So Chad's answer then, and how are you helping the team? I'm helping the team get busy. Utilization is up, right? We're trying to, maybe do some automation around our calls. We have a little bit of a script that we can make more calls more quickly because we have a thing that people are reading, right? So this all then becomes around activity orientation, right? So I'm pretending to be Chad a little bit here, right? I hope it's working, Patricia. But if you see hidden down here in the corner, right? Now my Chad hat is off. Todd's hat is going back on. Is number of client meetings is dropped. Number of client meetings is dropped. Now that might end up being the focus of the meeting. I could then, and I have in the past been forced to skirt my way around this, meaning like skip like different aspects of what might be happening. I could say, well, we're really busy. We might have more in April. We're going to have way more meetings in April. This is just, this is a lag, right? But you could be put in a tough position here, right? And what is this telling you, Trish? Is this telling you anything?
For me, and I know, and I'm sure a lot of people who are watching this kind of understand the notion of the what have you achieved, and also like when are we. A good question that they said we didn't point out was when is this going to be done? When is this going to happen? When are we going to have all the things that we want? And none of this actually satisfies any of that. That is a fair question. Actually, when are things going to be done? When we have the right information. For me, what this says, this information for me is like things that we've seen where you export it from some CRM and we look at this, and I think it's okay to have this kind of information. For me, it's when we only have this information and you're trying to make some sort of business decisions that you get in trouble. And so when we have only this information, we dance. And we just did what you did as Chad, and we start to dance. And when I have been, when I think about things like this, or when I've done this, I feel a little dirty saying that. It's for me, Todd, it's about, there's no accountability here.
Yeah.
I don't really understand what's happening. And there's a misperception of value. So it allows people to hide. And that's for me what that does with the accountability. And that's very counterintuitive to, are we delivering value?
Yeah. And you could like, as I was like pretending to be Chad, I was getting stressed out, right? Like just like putting myself in this circumstance, because if you start to drill in and ask other questions, it becomes difficult. So luckily these meetings are jam-packed and only an hour long because everybody goes to something else and forgets about it. And we're showing this, and we're showing this fictitious example of this consulting company, right? But this could easily be metrics out there that a lot of people are using, like velocity, right? These could be things that if you're using Scrum right now, and some of the things that we kind of view as I think I might call them like almost like an eggshell metric, right? Something that might tell you something at a point in time, but I don't think should be the center of a conversation here. Because all that same stuff that's happening in that example we just gave is going to happen with them, right?
Mm-hmm. And again, it's driving that certain behavior. So how do we start to think about that a little bit differently? So what Todd was basically talking about, and as Chad or as Todd, is that when you focus on activity, that's okay, but activity is really just going to tell you what people are doing. And so when we think of goals, you can even think of measurements these ways, which was a lot of these were just activity measurements, and some of it was output. Activity is what people are doing. Output is what you get, right? You get a release, you get a report. Outcome is where we're thinking about what is the outcome, what is the thing that the customer wants or needs that we can satisfy? What is that thing that they want? And so when you start to think about that, it's really taking the focus from inside the company of what we need to really physically just turning outside and saying, what is it that our customers want from us? And so that's where you start thinking about, having those customer conversations, understanding their behaviors, those different things. And one way that one question that I like when I try to get at the outcome of what a customer want is, what does the customer need my service for? What are they trying to get? And then I think about measuring it. But goals can fall into these three categories. A simpler example that we've used in different, other EBM webinars or some of our other IP is activity is like when you're digging a hole, output is the well, outcome is getting water to a community, right? And there's different ways that you can meet that getting water to a community. You can build a 7-Eleven, doesn't matter, right? Like there's different ways that you can get to that outcome. Is there anything you want to add here?
Yeah, I just want to add something that that can be frustrating about this is that, and stepping from left to right, just because everybody is really busy, and just because you're outputting a lot of stuff, does not mean that you're getting the desirable change in behavior from your customer, right? There is really hard line to draw, like cause and effect between them. And to use your example, just because we're really busy digging, just because we produce that well does not mean that well has water that's clean that we can give to people, right? It's really frustrating to know that. And so as much as we're measuring busyness and the output of things, we have to start with outcome, right? And we know this can hurt your head, right? We know it can, but we have to start there, because without that, we're just busy doing lots of things that don't matter, or that we don't know whether they matter or not.
And if we truly want to try to achieve that outcome, because the outcome can change it or be false, is we have to do it quickly. And that's what really like business agility for me is in a nutshell. So think about these, what we just showed Chad, it was obviously a lot of activity and output. And again, goals, what we're trying to do can fall into these three categories. And it's an interesting activity or exercise, I'll say, to think about what you're actually measuring are these three, because it'll inform you about what you're looking at. There's three types of goals in evidence-based management, EBM, and immediate tactical goals are, what's next, what we can do. Intermediate goals are a little bit larger. Strategic goals are, we may never reach them. Todd's going to do a better, give a better explanation. The thing that I want to add that you can't see from the evidence-based management guide necessarily as much as we're going to explain here is how we think about these in terms of time. And I don't think I usually am that explicit about, I think of these in terms of time because it structures a little bit of color of what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and if you think about that goal horizon and when it comes to time, and we've already talked about the significance of goals and behaviors and measurements and behaviors. If you think about immediate tactical goal, this is something right in front of your face, a month or less, right? Now, the EBM guide doesn't say that. A lot of what we're suggesting here may be Todd and or Patricia opinions around that, because it can and is very flexible. But I would think immediate tactical goals 1 month or less, intermediate goals 3 to 6 months. You and I talked about 3 months just seems like the right spot, right? But
6 months is a little too far, but it depends on
yeah.
your industry. Yeah.
Yeah. And then strategic goals. These are long-term organizational goals, right? This could be 1 to 2 years, right?
Yeah. And so we don't want people to go too long because you're not going to learn anything, but it's almost the reason that the time frame is interesting because it goes immediate tactical goal, pretty sure that we're going to hit that, right? And if you're using Scrum, maybe that's a sprint goal. If you're not using Scrum, maybe that's not a sprint goal, but it's that boundary of time of and ability to achieve it and how complex it is. So we have this in terms of think about those in terms of a time frame, and that will start to help you think about activity, output, and outcome too, because your immediate tactical goal might just be an output. And we're going to show you a little bit more in the case study. When we go through and we think about goals and what we're looking at in EBM, there's this notion of key value areas. And so in this essence for me, so there's top left is unrealized value. So there's 4 circles. The second right is current value, bottom 2 ability to innovate, time to market. The top 2 unrealized value is really about what's that future value? I'll say it like that. And the current value is what value do we have now? And of course you have things that you're going to measure, you're going to look at, and that really informs us about the market, the value. Below the line, when we're talking about ability to innovate, so it's, hey, how effective are we at working? Time to market is how long does it take us to actually learn about stuff? Those are about your organizational capability. And so in the same essence, before when we showed the 3 level values, the things below the line, your organizational capability, things you're trying to do to get better, might be where you start if you need to improve, but you need to have that in relation to something that's a little bit further. What we see in companies is that they're focused really in one area, and we never know what's going to happen. So they're really focused on their time to market, which is and maybe ability to innovate, but that's like putting a Lamborghini in the middle of Paris. You're not going to be able to drive that very quickly anywhere. Todd, you see a lot of people focus on just current value in your client.
Yeah, and that's so current value, right? As you were talking and describing, that would be focused on your existing customers, and a lot of what we find is hearing, well, our really big customers that give us a lot of money, we need to continue to make them happy, right? So we need to provide them the features that they're asking for, and we get entirely focused there. What we tend to see that happens as a result of that is an unrealized value, right? So maybe you're giving your current customers everything they want, but that could be missing out on a new customer segment, or identifying other gaps and satisfactions that users could potentially have that would make your product even more successful, right? And so for some reason, we've seen that as a trend, is current value. I think agility, when we could talk about Agile in general, I think there was this perception before that it was all about time to market, right? When we say that that's just a single bucket. And each one of these KVAs, by the way, we view as buckets of things that you should have measurements tied to. Every one of these buckets should have a measurement tied to provide a better and more holistic understanding of what might be happening. Now, that's not, I said what might be happening, right? Because just because this and your measurements look like this today doesn't mean like they're going to look like this tomorrow. That's why we talk in EBM about empiricism, right? Inspection, adaptation, and transparency.
Well, that was a nice segue.
Yeah, I was going for it. Did you like that?
I really did like that. So we talked about Chad. Chad's focused on very activity-based things. When you think about the ways goals are structured, there's activity, there's outputs, and there's outcomes. And the way that you can start to think about those types of goals is in a time horizon, right? So and how big those goals are, what you're really trying to achieve. And the inspection and adaptation mechanism is the metric, the measurement that you're looking. So that's kind of how this all flows together. And one of the reasons, so somebody is going to write, how is this different from OKRs? And this is it. So OKRs, when they're used well, should have this mechanism of inspection and adaptation. So this magic wand diagram that I call it is really the essence of evidence-based management. So we have empiricism, we have evidence, and we're using that to try to reach our different goals. And we're learning each time and running an experiment loop and having something that informs us if we're going in the right direction. And so it's so theoretical, but it's like Scrum, right? It's super simple, but it's really hard to do, especially if you get locked up and not think about outcomes. And there can be a lot of reasons why a team isn't thinking about outcomes, management isn't thinking about outcomes, an organization isn't thinking about outcomes. But when you don't do that, especially in this day and age, the sustainability and the ability for your company to pivot is going to come into question pretty quickly. So what if this looked a little differently, Todd?
Yeah. So we're gonna kind of go away from what we had talked about with Chad before. And we're gonna put this in different terms. We're gonna put this in more like what we would view from an EBM perspective. So Chad 1 was talking about making everybody really busy and outputting things, right?
Chad 1 knew what he knew. Chad 2
yeah.
knows something else.
Yeah. So Chad 2, working with the companies that they're currently working with and looking at the market, starts to hypothesize that if they add some kind of new service, right, around modern management practices, right? He's talked to some current customers. He's viewing what some other people are doing in the market, some of the competitors. He says, you know what? I think if we fill this satisfaction gap, we can make more money, right?
What's we can make more money. Satisfaction gap.
Yeah. So it really, in simple terms, we just talked about unrealized value. It's something that a user or potential user wants that you don't currently offer, right? It's something that would satisfy them, but there's a gap right now because you don't have it. So modern management practices, this consulting company does not offer services around improving other companies' management practices. So that is a gap because they don't offer it, and they don't offer it to existing customers, and they don't obviously offer it to new customers.
Right. And it's something that that people are voicing that would be interesting to them, that they want. All right. So there's a need now. Now we're thinking about the outcome.
So, and like the thought process here is Chad's thinking about needs or potential needs, right? That's where his mindset is. And he wants to test that, right? He wants to test to see if this would make the company more successful. So we have 3 different levels of goals, right? That over here on the right, and we have some metrics accompanying in it. And we also have our 4 questions that we started with, that we have the Mentimeter for. But I'm just going to read these goals, and then maybe we could tie in and talk about some of these measurements as I could.
And yeah, I think that's great. And just for people who may not be watching or seeing the screen, is that we've basically created a new dashboard, an updated dashboard that has some EBM thinking in it and shows some of the things that we were talking about, the goals. The one thing that I just wanted to caveat before we dive deeper into this, because obviously this is something that Todd and I created in Miro. We've talked through these case studies. We're doing this because if we were to show the real dashboards that we work on, obviously we'd have to go into hiding after this, but it's to show you that you can work through these and think through them, and it can be lightweight and should be lightweight in terms of how you adjust and what you do with your dashboards. So yeah, I would love if you could just go through the dashboard.
Yeah. So, and then maybe we'll follow up with the 4 questions and how our stance on that would change, right? So it's walking from strategic, our highest level goal the whole way down through. Our strategic goal that Chad has come up with is to help new customers become better modern managers that will increase employee satisfaction through our human-centric modern management practice at We Help People Forever Consulting, right? So this is saying that we want to improve management practices and increase employee satisfaction of companies that we're consulting for.
Very specific, their employee satisfaction.
Their employee satisfaction. So then our intermediate goal, right? 3 to 6 months, we prefer shorter, but provide management consulting to more than one existing client that is satisfied by the service. So this says that we're testing the service and a client is satisfied by it, right? This means that we've done it. And it's more than one. And to kickstart that, one hypothesis that Chad has is that if we have a white paper on modern management practices and put it out there, we might be able to get new leads to be able to test their service more. So this is an output, right? So immediate technical goal is an output. We want to develop this white paper so that we have something to share with prospective clients, right? And there's some interesting things we're measuring here. So you could see that in this dashboard, we put all 4 quadrants. We have them short: unrealized value, current value, ability to innovate, and time to market. Under unrealized value, one thing that we always measure from our consulting company perspective is our market share in the East Coast, right? So this is just something, this is something that we measure all the time. We're looking at what really ties in though is opportunity pursuit. And this is as it relates to this new management practice. These are opportunity pursuits that we have, right? You could see that we had some in February, 0 in January, because this idea didn't exist. Maybe in February, this idea was just something that Chad was talking with current clients about. You see an uptick in March a little bit. So it seems like there are some opportunities here. It seems like this is a satisfaction gap worth chasing, right? We won't know yet, but we're working on it. And then we have so some current clients. What current clients are we offering this to? You can see current clients. We've already got 2 of them that we're working with, right? So we have some white paper material and some case studies. And we're also beginning to measure client employee satisfaction, right? This is not employee satisfaction from our consulting service. This is actually employee satisfaction from the clients, right? And we're trying to drive those conversations. There was an uptick in March. Not sure why yet. Maybe it's some of these new practices we're putting in. We'll work on that with time. And then down here, ability to innovate. The one thing I really thought that we should point out here, Trish, is we have our employee satisfaction on there from a consulting company perspective. We talked, Trish, when we put this together, we talked a lot about how employee satisfaction could go in current value. And I think in the EBM guide, it's currently sitting there. From an ability to innovate perspective, the one thing that we're noticing here, and let's say suppose Chad is noticing, is people are really excited about this. They're working on something different, right? And so by way of that, we think that our employees might be more satisfied. So we're going to start measuring that ourselves, right? Let's eat our own dog food, as they say. Let's measure our employee satisfaction. Maybe see if there's a correlation here. So, and then just some other things here, like how long does it take for us to create a client playbook? This is all brand new stuff. So in February, it was a long time. We want this to be like 0.2 days, right? We want this to be something immediate that we can make a client specific playbook. Obviously that'll help with sales. And then to look at like our proposal time for this particular service. How to do, Trish?
You did amazing. So some of the things that I would love to add is so I have a little light bulb kind of thing next to a few of the different things that we were monitoring. So in UV, it's opportunities in pursuit. And in CV, it's client employee satisfaction, time to market, average management proposal turnaround, et cetera, right? Client playbook package. What you can see is those are not off the shelf measures that you grab. Some of those other things might be, right? Projects per employee, opportunities in pursuit. Actually, that's pretty normal. So you get that in $1. And there's activities that have to lead up to this. But what we're interested in these numbers, because this allows us to have that, have a conversation and answer those kind of 4 questions, and the when will it be done, have those conversations in a little bit more of an engaging way. And turn that when will it be done to, well, these are the goals that we're trying to pursue. And so before we get into the question, the employee thing, I think is interesting because when Ken Traver was talking about the key value areas for EBM, for him, employee satisfaction belongs there because he's thinking about when we invest in a company, if someone were to want to, venture capitalists come in, it's looking at the talent and the asset and what do those people know. And that's really, to him, that makes up the value of a company, for me too. We think it also belongs into ability to innovate because that really does affect what you can do as a company. So if you really think about from a consulting company, if you have people who are really excited and they're on 2 or 3 different projects, let's see how satisfied with that. Let's see if there's an ability to learn. So we can monitor things and think about things in a little bit of a different way, and our dashboards can tell us different things. The other thing is that we only laid out 2. It's not because we couldn't lay out more measurements or that we didn't have conversations about more. It's don't get burdened, don't get overwhelmed when you're trying to, 2 is gonna knock you out anyways. But like for each area, not too many, right? Because then you're not having a conversation like the questions on the left, which is how'd you make your decisions? Well, we're looking at the data, but we're actually also thinking about the feedback and the input that we're getting when we are marketing the white paper, when we're trying to talk and see who are the other people in this space. How's each team doing? Well, they're really excited and they're working on the tactical goal, and they're trying to pursue those things. And these are the hiccups that they face, but this is how they're going forward. How are you helping the team? Well, Chad, what are you doing to help the team now?
Yeah, so this actually really, Chad, I'm forever going to be called Chad. So, then you can start talking about things that you might be doing with, we talked about a bunch of things, creating alignment with these goals, ability to innovate. Really, maybe I'm trying to clear these impediments and help the team become more effective, right? I've just noticed that people are working on 3 or 4 different projects at the same time. It's really hard for them to focus. It's slowing down our ability to get this out into the market. So it's my job then to clear those impediments. And as far as what have I achieved, I was just mentioning that alignment around goals, we're making a lot of progress. Let's not make this the last time we talked. Feel free to grab me anytime you want. We're going to make sure that we present this. If you're using Scrum, a sprint review is a really great place to do this, but not just there. Make sure that you're having frequent and ongoing conversations with your stakeholder, because this could change fairly quickly, right? Before you know it, this deal pursuit could come in for $1 million and you just sold a massive amount of this. Or maybe it goes to 0 and your clients don't like what you did and you need to make your next immediate tactical goal to try to figure out where your management
maybe this isn't for us, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You want to figure that out quickly. So for those of you who are listening and with us here, what we hope is that you can see how the nature of the conversation changes.
Yeah.
So the first conversation, the focus of the goals was really just focused on what was done and the activity of what are you doing, right? That's what everybody was saying. What have you guys achieved? What have you done? And what this does, and especially when we're talking to stakeholders and management, it becomes I'm pulling you in because guess what? I need your help. So eventually, if we're really doing this, we know procurement's going to come in, their stakeholder maybe, or maybe they're external, however you guys identify them, but we're going to need their help at some point. And so we're going to need people who are here who can help us influence them if we can't do it directly. And so we're talking and we're taking that conversation differently. And Chad is moving into becoming a great agile leader who can work those skills, where he's redirecting the questions and he's saying, hey, I'm really helping the team this way, but we're having an issue here. Can you help? Because we're trying to do this. We're trying to hit these goals. And there's some things that are holding us back, or this approval process. Let's figure that out. And so it's just a different way to have a conversation. And you want your dashboard to be informative to you. So we promised some Q&A. So just some last thoughts really in terms of this story is, if we're thinking about better engagement of stakeholders and management, know that measurement, so it's related to the goals and the behaviors, but it's really for us in EBM a way to inspect and adapt the goals. And that's why it drives those different behaviors. Todd is very, very, very passionate about the second bullet because he has so much experience.
Yeah. And so you can drive and change the dynamic of these conversations too quickly. Moving away from everybody's really busy to we're aligned around outcome-oriented goals it's a substantial change in a lot of organizations. So what I recommend is to drive these conversations carefully and incrementally, as in your implementation of evidence-based management as well, because you might find yourself in a situation where I speak a lot with Ryan about this, about how just because there is data that is more of objective type of data doesn't mean that people will necessarily behave rational to it. In fact, oftentimes the opposite is true. So be a little careful.
Yeah, and that would be Ryan Ripley.
Yeah.
If you didn't know who that was. But it is super helpful, right? So even when you want to get started and you're thinking about that activity output or outcome, it might be pencil to paper, or, just thinking really quickly about the things that we're doing. Are they activities, outputs, or outcomes? Or if you're not there yet, think about the things that you're measuring. Are those activity outputs or outcomes? And if you can figure out that their activities or outputs, just ask yourself, well, why are we doing this? Or what does this mean for the customer? What are they hoping to get out of that? And that starts to change that a little bit. And it's harder, but it's super worth it. And Todd, you actually started applying, you and Ryan started applying EBM to your own business. So when you say it's worth it, you really mean it's worth it.
Yeah. We very frequently look at evidence-based management for a business, right? From how we set our goals to the measurements that lends us to new and different experiments that we try. For instance, YouTube was a big experiment, and the content on there and looking at themes around what people are consuming and liking also lets us to what other satisfaction gaps we have. What content are we not providing that people would like? So that's just one of the examples, but we use it to run our business, evidence-based management to run our business.
Yeah, and so that's really it's really been something that's exciting to see how you guys are making those informed decisions. We already talked about the goals, measures, behaviors. This last bullet is really it's really Todd as a recovering developer in organizations, but being busy does not mean that anybody's going to be happy.
Yeah, just because you're billing 12 hours a day and working on 3 different projects and outputting a lot of stuff doesn't mean that your customer is getting what they desire, right?
Yeah. All right. So with that, we have about 14 minutes for questions. I have not been looking, so we can get into that if I can find my. I've lost my mouse. Well, can you see the questions, Todd?
Yeah, I'm going to start looking through them a little bit. I did see a couple that I thought might be interesting to talk about.
You've already seen them. All right. I have it open too.
You do. Here's one. How about one of crucial points is about building trust. How can EBM help to build trust with stakeholders? I'll offer a quick nugget there. I think that we start to move away from superficial conversations into real conversations about what's happening, right? I say that because of how many organizations I've worked in that every project status meeting, it's everything's green except for one thing that's yellow, and then everything is concentrated on talking about how to get that thing back to green. When the reality of it is that everything in the organization is yellow at best, or maybe red, meaning failing, right? And so I feel like we tend to live in the illusion we want and crave as human beings to be certain about everything and to know that our plans and what we think is going to happen is actually going to happen. But the reality of it is, when we're coping and building products in the complex domain of work, that oftentimes isn't true. So I think you build trust by living in reality.
For me, that one's interesting because the other thing that I would add to that would be the transparency. And so the issues that we faced, that we talked about, was the alignment and, what are you really doing? And so if we have goals that we can talk about and the things that we're trying to do to reach those goals and make that transparent, you're doing 2 things. You're saying, this is what we're trying to do. We did it, or we're doing it or not. But also you're inviting trust from stakeholders in terms of their input. So when they are able to give their input, and when the people who are doing the work are getting their input and then they're aligned to something, you're creating a whole different behavior rather than either wrong rock or you're dumb, just do what I tell you. So go and make 75 phone calls. So that's that. How about this one, Todd? Differences between OKRs, and do you recommend it?
So OKRs are complementary, a complementary practice to evidence-based management. Truth be told, I have yet to see a good implementation of them. I know that the intent is there for them to be a good tool. I think that they could be complementary, but not required by EBM. I think that would be my answer.
So I've seen, so OKRs, they're not new, they're coming back. It's a goal setting framework. EBM is kind of a goal setting framework. But I've seen people shake. I've seen teams shake because they say, we need to do that. And there's no empiricism that's been lost. And so, if you can take both things and blend them, I think that would be good if you have a company that is comfortable with that language. The thing that I would think that you would want to, if you can get your goals set, is to think about the key value areas, because what Todd said is, look at one or two things to make sure you're looking at those different spaces, because otherwise it can get very lopsided. Also, if you're looking for an area to improve, that will tell you, you can start from the key value areas. So if you can't start from the goals, look at the key value areas and say, what are we doing and where do we need to improve? Are we ignoring anything? Is another way to approach it.
I think that's actually some really good advice. And you can also reverse that. What we have found in all of our conversations over the many years of this is that people have a really hard time starting in at the goals and making them outcome oriented. Although we do believe that once you get good at it, you can't unforget it, right? But I really like your advice of saying you don't have to start there. You can start with the KVAs. It's just one or two things to measure under there and make it real stuff, right? And the evidence-based management guide appendix has some ideas in for you. Don't just get locked into those, though. Make it fit your context. But I think that's some good advice, Trish.
Cool. I have one for you, and then I'm gonna let us answer one that it will be kind of fun. Do you consider stakeholder satisfaction surveys to be useful? If so, have you seen models or styles which you'd recommend over others?
So I think that stakeholder satisfaction surveys are useful to a certain extent, but don't tell the whole story. So if we would differentiate stakeholder and customer, I think that you can learn so much from that, but oftentimes you're missing a large amount of context. And here's another thing: just because your internal stakeholders are happy with what you're doing doesn't mean that your customers are. And so I don't think it ever really hurts to try to gain some insight into what's happening with our stakeholders and or what's happening with our customers. I like to differentiate that, right? Customers could be a subset of stakeholders or could be its own thing, depending on how you want to define stakeholder and customer. But it's sort of like NPS, right? It only tells you a really tiny corner of the story. So I wouldn't say it's not useful at all. Let's just not make that our number one decision-making indicator.
So there was a question here that I thought was really interesting in terms of, is EBM really a tool or framework, or is it something that's really a mindset that you could apply to other things? I actually think the question is, it depends, and yes. Well, yes, and it's much more of a yes and, right? So I've seen people think about how they order their life as a product backlog, right? Stephanie Ackerman has done some stuff. Todd and I have used it in the context of fitness, which is really interesting in terms of how do we balance what we do in terms of, what we're trying to achieve. So is it that you want to run? Is it that you want to climb stairs? Why do you want to do that? You want to hit that race, and then what else? Is it because you want to be an older person and be able to climb stairs? We've talked about in terms of just the physicality of the body, flexibility versus lifting. Todd is a certified CrossFit instructor. So what have you learned in applying this to yourself? I don't want to give all your details away.
Yeah, I think it's really applicable to anything, any kind of business, any kind of product development, fitness, right? So an example from a fitness realm is I somehow got in my mind that I would try to run a trail ultra marathon, right? And that became an intermediate goal to my overall strategic goal, which is to be able to really physically do anything that I want whenever I want. And I can test myself with that by rock climbing or whatever. And my immediate tactical goals leading up to that were really kind of output oriented, like try to beat my half marathon time, be consistent about training, things like that. And you were mentioning ability to innovate. I viewed that as flexibility, right? And then current value, I would really kind of use my fitness strengths, time to market, frequency of how much I'm stretching, frequency of how much I'm training, those kinds of things. So I think broadly you can apply that to anything that you really want to guide yourself by your experiences, including what happens if you have this great plan for 2 years to train for it and get injured, right? Or a life event takes over. All these things can change your path. So I'm excited to experiment with different realms, but so far running a business, product development efforts, fitness.
Yeah, we'll see. You know what kind of things we get into. So I think we have time for maybe a couple more questions, but we have, over 60 questions here. Todd and I will go through these and we'll, either answer them through blogs or reach out directly or do some videos. So I just want to let you know that there was some question in here that's more about the stakeholder, which I think we should talk about. There's one question that was about 50% when we were talking about the questions and we surveyed, and it was like, what have you guys achieved? And they said, hey, that's actually, code for, are you guys worth it? Should we keep paying for you? And I think that's very fair. So question about engagement. So what is better when engaging with stakeholders? Should you say no, or should you say, we'll backlog that and determine the priority at a later date? What do you think, Todd?
I used to have that as a go-to saying for a product owner, and it got me in a lot of trouble. Right. So I'll think about that idea and put it in the product backlog. The reality of it is if you're saying that, it's not a definite. It's not, I'm absolutely going to use it. I kind of will go back to my other point. This sounds going to sound a little bit harsh, but let's maybe live in bring it back to reality. You can't do everything. Right. And not every idea is something that you're going to implement. And the bigger your product backlog is, the harder it is to decipher and make transparent and all the things. So I think it's okay to be soft about it and say, not right now. But it's also, you're right as a product owner to say no. I don't think that that's it. Now I caution that, and I've made the mistake of doing that in a public forum. Right. It's like, yeah, there's 30 people at this sprint review, and I look someone, I say, no, that's not going to happen. That's probably not the greatest way to do it. Probably with a little polish would help.
Yeah,
but it's okay to say no.
Actually. And so this is, I've definitely been like, no, I just did that yesterday. And then afterwards you think about it, but that's where good facilitation comes in. So being upfront about what you're planning, and then the conclusion of that. So if you say no, what you don't want to do is turn down someone's idea and you don't get their input in the future. So you want for them to understand why, but also if you're putting it on the backlog, that means you think there's some value, and explain why. So those kind of things. There was a question in here that was about, Patricia said something about Ken. And I can't find it anymore because there's a lot of questions, but the gist of what I was saying before was in those 4 different key value areas, employee satisfaction for Ken lives, and for me too, in a way, in current value, because the value of the organization there's value in the people who understand and know the things, the politics, all the history that's gone on, how to work and all those, and that can be negative value too. But that satisfaction will let you know, how the organization is doing. So for instance, they'll look at things that we'll look at, that he and I have looked at together, companies, is what's the turnover? What's the turnover on team? How fast are people wanting to join the teams? Because there's this notion of what is that brand? What is the value of the organization? One very specific question that I've asked there is not like, hey, you guys happy? Which you can do easily, but it's, if someone offered you the same amount of money to join another company, would you? Right. So I'm looking at it in a different way, because what's important to Ken Schwaber is that, the work that people do is not seen as a cost, but actually as driving value in an organization. So hopefully, whatever question was in there, I answered it. But if not, you can hit us up on LinkedIn, and we'll let you know. So thank you everyone for your time. We hope that, we gave some color, we showed the dashboards. It may or may not have been what you wanted, but hopefully it spawned some questions and thinking. Feel free to connect more with us. And all the hard questions should especially go to Todd Miller. And if you need anything else, contact me.
Yeah.
But thank you very much. And thank you, Todd, so much for your time. This was fun.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.